From modern action to romantic fantasy, today's manhwa variety pack might just have something for you to start reading. Manhwa titles are timestamped in the video for your convenience. Our first manhwa for today is The Civil Servant of the Sword Returns, a regression action manhwa that I've currently read up to chapter 73 on. Its main character is An Soo-ho, a civil servant living in the typical modern fantasy setting that most manhwa readers are familiar with. Anyway, Soo-ho's purpose in life was to get rid of all the gates that plagued his world. He helped all sorts of hunters, awakeners, or heroes, however you want to call them, but sadly was betrayed because they wanted to keep society as they are instead of dealing with the threat completely. Somehow, Soo-ho regresses back in time and has a chance to actually eliminate the gates forever. Utilizing everything he can, knowledge of future events, recruiting and saving people that would turn bad later, and more, Soo-ho's journey will be clearly hard-fought to get there. The story is 8 out of 10. For regression or reincarnation manhwas, having a perfect memory is something that always irked me with these stories. This one actually goes into detail of how Soo-ho is able to remember everything and documents his journey of trying to truly save the world properly. Otherwise, nothing much to say other than the usual modern action-y fantasy pace and notes, really. The characters are 7 out of 10. As of right now, the majority of the characters that have been introduced are, for the most part, very simplistic for their part in the story. They might have detailed backstories or even introductions, but serve more of a basic function for Soo-ho's purpose. Hopefully, they introduce more complex ones later. The art, though, is an 8 out of 10. Weirdly enough, the presentation, action scenes, and overall vibe very much reminds me of I'm the Max Level Newbie from my previous videos. I haven't done any research on who did the art, but it just feels very reminiscent of it. You can utilize this knowledge to see if it's for you though. So if you're a fan of modern fantasy action manhwas where the main character is a civil servant who wants to eliminate the gate threat forever, then please make sure to take a look at The Civil Servant of the Sword Returns. This next manhwa to take a look at is Raising the Second Male Lead's Son, a romantic fantasy manhwa that I've currently read up to chapter 54 on. The protagonist of this plot is Elia Lawton, a reincarnated individual who found herself, after an accident, possessing a character from a novel from her previous life, a daughter of a ruined barony at that. Through an accidental encounter with Leanne, the adoptive son or nephew of the second male lead, Duke Caden, this situation would prove to be the start or spark of a relationship that forever will change these three individuals. What starts off as a typical romantic fantasy story grows in an interesting yet plausible direction that, while a little much or over the top, at least it does offer an explanation, and I wouldn't be surprised if it finished before it reaches 100 chapters. The story is 8 out of 10. Getting involved with the Duke due to his adoptive son is very much a typical romantic fantasy setup, and for the most part there are no surprises in how the manhwa chooses to develop its story. The only caveat is what I noted in the synopsis, and that there's a somewhat sudden reveal or shift that may prove to be a little bit too much, or at least offer an answer to lingering questions. The characters are also 8 out of 10. Reincarnated female lead, cold and stoic male lead due to childhood traumas, and an understanding, loving, and overall cute child that is the initial connection between the two is very much on the trope line. Each individual growing closer and closer and able to realize their feelings is definitely at least a breath of fresh air at this pacing. The art is 7 out of 10. Whilst the story and characters are a little above what I would consider nice for a romantic fantasy manhwa, it sadly doesn't do anything much with its art. It's merely about normal for the course and what you can expect from this type of genre. So if you're a fan of romantic fantasy manhwas with a childcare sub-theme inside but it doesn't take too much of a focus, then Raising the Second Male Lead's Son might be something to look into. The Mighty Teacher is a Roleplayer is the first of 2 shorter stories I have for you this week. It's a reincarnation manhwa that I've currently read up to chapter 26 on. Chris Doughton is the name of its main character. Of course, as is expected, this version of Chris is a reincarnated person who found herself possessing the character, which has a job as a teacher at a fantasy academy meant to train heroes. Issue? Due to that possession, Chris cannot use any magic, and that's the only good trait that she has. Now having to utilize their roleplay and acting skills to the best of their ability, Chris will have to truly fake it till you make it enough times to maybe, just maybe, be able to return to her own world. The potential is 8 out of 10. From the intro, you already get quite the impression of the misunderstandings that we will build up to. Chris, right from the get-go, has to navigate situation after situation that will prove to be quite mentally stressful, but also quite comedic for us readers as the other characters are completely duped and misunderstand the true capability of their teacher. I will say though, Chris is hyper aware of how she's perceived by those around her. The art is 7 out of 10. The emotional stress, the strain of trying to think things through on the spot, and even having a number of action scenes that allow Chris to be in the light in some unexpected ways. Otherwise, prepare for a school life background with a perspective from a teacher that looks to lead students well, but from lying and misunderstandings. So if you enjoy newer stories and are curious what someone can do when they possess someone of a fantasy teaching role but with no actual ability or capability themselves, then The Mighty Teachers or Roleplayer would at least warrant a try from you. The other shorter story I have for you this week is I Opt to Live Villainously, a modern drama manhwa that I've currently read up to chapter 22 on. The focus of this plot is on Yoon Tae-shik, an individual living in modern Korea who has spent his last 3 years working as a secretary under Kang Moon-jung, an executive and chaebol heir for the Daeyoung Group. With his own set of circumstances, on one day, he's asked out of the blue by his boss Moon-jung to marry him? Wait, what? Instead of being a romantic one though, it clearly is more about capability and utilizing Tae-shik to help cement Moon-jung's position within the company and even potentially raise it. A modern political struggle within a chaebol family is what we are here for. The potential is 9 out of 10. Right from the get-go, both Tae-shik and Moon-jung are introduced as quite the capable individuals. It is not predominantly a romantic story, but instead one of capability and weighing risks to try and achieve a certain goal. Tae-shik, with his feelings and overall loyalty to Moon-jung at an all-time high, will clearly gladly take up that mantle. The art is 8 out of 10. As is normal for modern drama manhwas, especially those that showcases the chaebol families as the main platform, this manhwa focuses more heavily on subtle meanings, facial expressions through conversations that aim to have both the main character, and in some cases the reader, question or judge the characters on their own. So if you're a fan of modern drama manhwas where an executive marries their subordinate, similar to My Boss's Special Request from my previous videos, but with more of a serious atmosphere and chaebol family backdrop, I Opt to Live Villainously would definitely be something to give a shot. Welcome to the highlight portion of today's video. Our highlight today is the curious case of Chronicle, which I've now read up to chapter 89 on. Info card description will have links to my original opinion. Adrian Lawrence, as a reminder, is the name of its main character, an Earth-born individual who found himself reincarnated in a fantasy world that, through seemingly a fated thread, inherits Manuel Lucas's legacy, which allowed him to gain great power. Through this, he then enacted revenge on the immediate threats to him and his family, whilst ensuring their safety as well. Now that we have moved on though, we get to see him start influencing the politics of not just his territory, but that of the whole world that he now inhabits, trying to instill a saint that's actually part of his own cohort, but also then meeting people who are of legendary power status who were actually kind of friends with Manuel Lucas. Either way, now though, considering the last 5 chapters, there has been a giant story drop that might just change where this plot may go. My previous scores for this manhwa was 10 out of 10 for story, 8 out of 10 for characters, and 9 out of 10 for art. The story stays the same at 10 out of 10 as I noted the initial arc and hook were actually really good. The middle arc is honestly quite weak and you might drop off there, but the latest arc afterwards just kicked the door down and allowed for a lot of potential ways to actually be possible, so considering that, I'm really excited where they might go with this. The characters stay the same at 8 out of 10, as overall, the points I noted in my previous video has stayed the same. Characters are clearly either an ally or an enemy, and there are no individuals who are in between. Rather, with the latest reveal, it might be able to make some more complex ones, but we'll just have to see. The art also stays the same, but at 9 out of 10, as the fusion between sci-fi and fantasy is still very much established, but is very much leaning more towards that fantasy space. Considering the latest spoiler, though, that Adrian can return to Earth back and forth, the art, in my opinion, can only go up from here. The Curious Case of Chronicle, when I covered it last, had finished its season, but however, now has come back, and honestly, it's increasing my interest in it based off its crazy reveal. I do hope that it's able to keep at it and not start slipping similar to what it did in that middle arc that I mentioned earlier. Fans of fantasy action manhwas would definitely enjoy. Would you agree or would you not? Comment down below your thoughts on this manhwa. Thanks so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Write down in the comment section down below what manhwa you've been reading and I might just take a look. Till next time though, have a good read.